Okay, let's unpack this. You know those scenes in the Transformers movies where metal just shapes itself into these incredible machines?
Right.
Imagine that, but instead of, like, complex robots, it's a single material doing the morphing. And all thanks to remote control.
It sounds like science fiction.
It really does. Sounds like pure fantasy, right? Cool. Get ready, because that's exactly what we're diving into today, a material that's kind of bending the rules of what's possible.
And what's so fascinating here is, we're not talking about traditional robotics. There are no tiny motors or intricate gears inside this.
No moving parts in the usual sense.
Exactly. It's a totally new approach, a novel material engineered over at Princeton University. Think of it. A metamaterial.
Okay, metamaterial. That's a key word here, isn't it?
It really is. And just to remind everyone, that means it gets its properties from its structure, how it's designed, not just its chemical makeup.
Got it. Architecture over atoms, sort of.
Precisely. And this material, it can expand, change shape, even move around, all without any internal machinery. It's all triggered by simple electromagnetic commands.
Just by magnetic field.
Yeah. This isn't just, a new material. It feels like a fundamental shift in how we think about structure and function. It could lead to entirely new kinds of devices.
Definitely. And you mentioned it's made of, what, basic plastics and magnetic bits.
That's right. A combination of basic plastics and specially designed magnetic composites. And it's this really clever design that gives it these, well, almost unbelievable capabilities.
So our mission today is to really dig into how this works.
Yeah.
What's the secret sauce? And what kind of world this could maybe unlock.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this research beautifully merges material science and robotics. It's a really innovative blend.
And the inspiration is kind of surprising, isn't it?
It really is. It comes from something quite elegant. The ancient art of origami, paper folding.
Origami, wow.
Oh.
How does that connect?
Well, the Princeton team looked at how simple folds in paper can create incredibly complex 3D shapes and movements. They applied that thinking here.
That's brilliant. And they've even come up with a name for it, a Metabot.
Yeah, Metabot. Because it's a metamaterial that behaves like a bot, essentially. It can actively change its shape, move around independently.
Okay, so here's the big question then. How do you get a material with, like you said, no traditional moving parts to actually do things, to perform these complex actions?
Right. The key is using a magnetic field. This gives you remote, contactless control over the material structure itself.
So you can just wave a magnet nearby, essentially.
Basically, yeah. Imagine making something expand or bend just with that magnetic field, no strings, no direct touch. But the really ingenious part comes from a concept called chirality.
Chirality. Okay, that sounds a bit technical. Is it like handedness?
Yeah.
Like our left and right hands being mirror images?
Exactly like that. Perfect analogy. In this Metabot, it refers to the mirroring of the tiny building blocks, the unit cells within the structure.
So tiny mirrored components.
Think of it like having two identical Lego bricks, but one is the mirror image of the other. When you build something with these mirrored units in a specific pattern, it creates this asymmetry.
Okay.
And that asymmetry allows the whole structure to respond to forces, like that magnetic push, in much more complex ways than if all the units were identical.
This tiny mirroring detail leads to big movements.
Huge movements. Tu Zhao, one of the lead researchers, mentioned the Metabot can make these really large contortions, twisting, contracting, shrinking, all from what seems like a gentle magnetic push.
That's incredible. So it's not just a tiny wiggle. We're talking significant shape-shifting.
We are. And another researcher, Minji Chen, pointed out something vital. Those electromagnetic fields, they're not just the signal, they're also the power source.
Ah, right. So the remote control and the battery are kind of combined in this invisible field. Exactly, which allows these complex, almost robotic movements to be triggered remotely and, crucially, instantaneously. They're really pushing the boundaries of power electronics here, showing you can transfer torque instantly without wires.
Okay, so magnets and chirality are key.
Yeah.
What about the actual structure? You mentioned origami.
Right. At the heart of this is a specific geometric design. It's called the Kresling pattern.
Kresling pattern.
Yeah. Imagine plastic tubes, but they have these carefully placed supporting struts or creases.
Okay.
These act like hinges. So when you compress the tube, it doesn't just squash flat, it also twists in a predictable way. And if you twist it, it compresses.
Huh. Okay, I'm sort of picturing those, those twisty drinking straws.
Yeah.
but obviously much more engineered.
That's a decent visual, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the building blocks of this Metabot are made by connecting two of these Kresling tubes together, but here's the key again as mirror images of each other.
There's the chirality again.
You got it. And this clever mirrored pairing allows each section to move independently when you apply those precisely engineered magnetic fields we talked about.
So the field makes the tubes twist or collapse.
Or pop open, exactly, in a very controlled sequence. And it's this orchestration of movements at the tiny unit level that leads to the big, complex behavior of the whole material.
So it's like a tiny, magnetically conducted origami orchestra. That's really elegant.
It is quite elegant.
But I remember reading something that really caught my eye, that this material can do things that seem to, well, break the rules of physics, or at least our intuitive understanding of them.
Yes, that's one of the most mind-bending aspects. Because of that chirality, that structural asymmetry, the material can show some really unusual behavior. Defies simple action-reaction logic sometimes.
How so?
Well, Glacio-Paulino, another key researcher, gave a great example. Take a normal rubber beam. If you twist it clockwise, then twist it back counterclockwise the same amount. What happens?
It goes back to where it started, right? Action, opposite reaction, back to normal.
Exactly. That's our everyday experience. But this Metabot, it can behave differently.
Yeah.
If you twist it clockwise, it collapses, okay? Then twist it counterclockwise, and it reopens. That part's maybe somewhat expected.
Right. Collapse, reopen, seems logical enough.
If you do it the other way around, twist it counterclockwise first, it collapses.
Okay, still collapsing.
And then, if you twist it clockwise, it collapses even further.
Wait, it collapses more when you apply the opposite twist. That doesn't sound right at all.
It feels totally counterintuitive, doesn't it? This asymmetrical response mimics a phenomenon called hysteresis.
Hysteresis, I've heard that term.
Yeah, you find it in lots of fields, engineering, physics, even economics. It basically means a system's response depends on its past history. It doesn't just snap back to the same state. Its memory matters.
Okay.
And these history-dependent systems are notoriously hard to model with math. This metamaterial, though, it gives us a physical, tangible way to directly simulate those complex responses.
Whoa. So instead of just complex equations, you have a physical thing that does the hysteresis.
Precisely. Think about the implications for studying complex systems. It's like having a real-world physical model for behaviors that were mostly theoretical or needed heavy computation before.
That's potentially huge, like a physical analog computer for these tricky phenomena. So what did other experts think? This sounds like it would make some waves.
Oh, definitely. The reaction from the wider scientific community seems to have been really positive. Xuanhe Zhao at MIT, a big name in materials and robotics.
What did he say?
He called it opening up a new and exciting avenue in origami design and applications. He was apparently really impressed by the versatility and the potential function of these modular chiral origami metamaterials.
High praise from a leader in the field. Anyone else?
Yeah, Davide Bedoni from Italy went even further. He called the work groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking.
And suggested it could drive a paradigm shift across a whole range of fields. He listed soft robotics, aerospace engineering, energy absorption, even spontaneous thermoregulation.
Wow, that's a massive list. A paradigm shift. That's a strong statement.
It really highlights how adaptable this core idea seems to be. And the researchers themselves, they've already started exploring some of these potentials.
Like what? What are the first applications they're looking at?
Well, in robotics, they've made a tiny prototype. Really tiny, about 100 microns high. That's roughly the thickness of a human hair.
Using lasers.
Yeah, using advanced laser lithography. And the idea is you could have similar, maybe even smaller robots that could, navigate inside the human body.
For medicine.
Exactly. Delivering drugs very precisely, or maybe assisting in incredibly delicate surgeries.
Microscopic magnetic origami robots inside us. That's straight out of sci-fi, but it sounds like it's getting closer. What else? You mentioned thermoregulation.
Right. They did this really cool experiment. They engineered the surface so it could shift between being black, which absorbs light and heat, and being reflective.
So it can change color on command.
Effectively, yeah. And by doing that, they could control its temperature just by exposing it to sunlight. They got swings from about 27 Celsius up to 70 C and back again.
Just by changing its surface state.
Just by changing the surface state via the magnetic field. Think about self-regulating materials for buildings, saving energy, or maybe even clothes that adapt to keep you comfortable.
A material that controls its own temperature.
Yeah.
Incredible. Did they mention anything about optics?
They did, yeah. The unique structure opens up some pretty intriguing possibilities there, too, in optics and photonics.
Like new kinds of lenses.
Potentially, yeah. Or antenna, other devices that manipulate light waves in new ways because of this controllable structure. And looking even further out,
What?
there's this really mind-bending idea of designing physical structures that could act like logic gates in a computer.
Physical logic gates made from this material. That sounds radical.
It's definitely a more distant vision, but yeah. Instead of electronic transistors, maybe you could have these mechanical structures doing computations. Professor Polino mentioned this might even offer a way to simulate really complex stuff, like non-commutative states, things that are super hard for normal computers.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. We've got this new material, inspired by origami, built from relatively simple stuff like plastics and magnets.
Right, but structured very cleverly.
Structured very cleverly using chirality. And it acts like a robot, expanding, moving, changing shape, but with no internal motors. It's all controlled by external magnetic fields.
Spot on.
And it even shows this weird, counterintuitive hysteresis behavior, which could actually be useful for simulating complex systems.
Exactly. That physical simulation aspect is really exciting.
And the potential uses are just, oh, wow.
Wow.
Tiny medical bots, self-regulating temperatures, new optics, maybe even physical computing down the line.
It really spans a huge range. It's that blend of materials science and robotics, and its ability to kind of bend the physical rules we expect that makes it stand out.
So as you're listening to this, maybe think about it. What does it mean if we have materials that are this adaptable, this controllable? Materials that can physically embody complex behaviors.
Yeah, how might these metabots become the building blocks for future tech in ways we, can't even really imagine yet?
It definitely gives you something profound to consider.
Yeah.
And if you want to dive really deep into the science, the research was published in Nature back in 2025.
That's right. The paper is Modular Chiral Origami Metamaterials by Tuo Zhao and colleagues. You can look it up with the DOI online.
And we should probably acknowledge the funding sources, too. The National Science Foundation, Princeton Materials Institute, and others played a key role in supporting this fantastic work.